Hi, and welcome to the 7th asynchronous module for SLS 312, Techniques in Second Language Teaching, Reading and Writing. The topic of today's class is going to be writing in the digital world, or incorporating technology in writing instruction. We'll start by looking at the impact of word processing on the teaching of writing. We'll then take a look at differences between asynchronous and synchronous means of teaching writing online. Next, we'll discuss various internet resources available for both teachers and students in terms of writing. And finally, we'll discuss two specific digital genres, which are blogs and also fandoms, or fan fiction. So to begin, many of you have grown up in a world where word processing was the norm. Now, when I first started school, computers were not normal, and even going on into high school, word processing was not always required for our papers. So I definitely still submitted certain essays and other papers by hand. Or in a hard copy with handwriting. But as I'm sure you're aware, there are many benefits to word processing. The first of these would be cutting and pasting. So whether you use Pages on a Mac or Microsoft Word or Google Docs, you should know that you have the ability to cut parts of your document and paste it in other places, which can be very helpful for creating an organized piece of writing, and it also makes editing extremely easy. So whereas before you almost had to rewrite an entire essay if you wanted to change the order of your ideas or move a certain sentence around, now you don't have to do that. There are also many spelling and grammar checks in place in these documents. You can turn them off. You can also have them alert you as you go if a certain word is not spelled wrong. Maybe it even auto-corrects it for you. So definitely advantages that 20, even 15, 20 years ago we didn't have. Also for individuals with solid keyboarding skills, so if you know how to type quickly, typing your papers is definitely going to be faster for you if you do it on a word processor than if you were to write it by hand. Also, word processing can lead to greater readability. So not only being able to read others' writing, but also your own writing later on. And finally, with the internet and the ability to save documents on computers, it is much easier to distribute our texts. So whereas before we would have had to make photocopies and possibly send our papers via mail or eventually fax, now we can just copy and paste. You can even upload and then send an email, and we can even share our Google documents, for example, with other people. So your teachers and other partners can see documents before they're complete and actually give feedback on them as you go. For teachers, word processing can also help to provide feedback in a more efficient way. At least that's one of the pros of it. So for example, teachers who provide feedback using a word processor, students have commented that it's much easier to read and understand what the instructor said. So if your instructor doesn't have particularly good handwriting, most likely you'll be able to read whatever it is they typed on your document. Also, feedback via a word processor can sometimes make the receipt of feedback much faster. So for example, if you turn in a document via email or via Laulima, your instructor, if they complete their feedback or their comments on the weekend or after school, they could send it back to you at past class hours. So you may even receive your feedback in the middle of the night or in the afternoon at some point. Some cons, though, and we'll discuss this a little bit more when we get to providing feedback on second language writing. One would be that when, for example, teachers insert comments or make changes in student documents in Word or Google Docs. Students have the ability to simply accept all changes without necessarily understanding why the teacher or the tutor has made those changes. Furthermore, comments can be deleted without necessarily the topic of the comment being addressed. So just some food for thought. Two other caveats to keep in mind in terms of using technology and word processing. The first is that while it may be tempting to think that your future students will all be rather tech savvy, writing effectively on computers does require a unique skill set. So depending on the context in which you teach, you should be aware that keyboarding skills are not a given, right? So particularly if you are working with second language writers, the ability to type fluidly and quickly in that second language should not just be assumed. So especially for those of you who have learned languages other than English, or for those of you whose first language was not English, or maybe who first learned to type in a language that wasn't English and that used a different script, coming to then type in English or being able to type in another language in another script can be very difficult because obviously you have a different alphabet, you have characters in different places on the keyboard, and it can be quite a slow process. So just something to keep in mind when you go to teach, that you may not be able to expect your students to type quickly or to expect that they will all be familiar with and know certain keyboarding conventions that we have acquired through our years of experience with typing in English. The next caveat is that using a word processor also requires access to a computer or some smart device, and often the internet. So in the United States, yes, most contexts, students do have access to word processors or smartphones, and also many other developed countries. However, there are many, many institutional contexts around the world, and even some in the United States, where the students do not have regular access to computers or to smart devices or to the internet. So if you are to go and teach in these situations and you require students to use their smartphones, or you request that they type their papers or submit their papers online, you may end up marginalizing individuals who do not have access to this technology. So just something to be aware of, and also maybe something you want to ask your students in a needs analysis when you get a new group. And then depending on your students' access or their ability to access technology, their familiarity with typing in English or in another language, and their ability to access computers or the internet, you may then have to tailor your assignments so that everyone in your class can complete your writing assignment successfully and hopefully improve their writing capabilities in the language that you're teaching. So now I wanted to briefly discuss teaching online, specifically teaching writing online. And I think it's great that we get to discuss this topic now, that it has been almost 3 months that you guys have participated in 3 different class formats. You have participated in face-to-face lessons, asynchronous lessons, such as this one that you are listening or watching now, and synchronous lessons, where we met on Zoom. So there are benefits and drawbacks and also unique characteristics of both the asynchronous and synchronous format, and I'll discuss just a few of them here. One of them is one of the characteristics and also benefit of the asynchronous format is that the non-synchronicity of the communication means that a text can be composed and edited prior to transmission at a more leisurely pace, which often tends to mean more reflective and considered responses with greater participation from less proficient students. So when you require your students to participate in some sort of asynchronous writing task, for example, posting on a discussion board. Or, as another example, the task you'll do today, which is creating a clog post, very similar to a blog post. Rather than being expected to participate orally in a face-to-face class, you have time to reflect on this lecture, to reflect on the reading for today, and to take as much time as you need to compose a response to the questions which you'll find at the end of this video. And ideally then, this would inspire more reflective, deeper and more considered or more thoughtful responses on the part of your students, with making sure and enabling students who aren't always the first to raise their hand or to volunteer answers, but really ensuring that these students get the chance to participate equally. Another advantage is that archived discussions and chats or blogs relieve participants of relying on memory or notes to recall what others have contributed. Archives also create opportunities for course participants to build upon prior discussions, and if you happen to have missed a chat, you can later still benefit from the discussion. So whereas in a face-to-face or a synchronous setting, if you were sick or you weren't able to attend, and oftentimes you missed out on what happened in the class. But asynchronous tasks or discussions are archived, and you often have an extended period of time to do them, so that if you weren't able to get to it one day, or you were busy with other things, that you could still learn from the discussion and eventually participate. And finally, the playing field is also leveled for all learners by allowing for the extended time to reflect, and also from decreased pressure to perform on the spot, like in face-to-face or synchronous session. And also, some people do communicate better in writing, or at least they feel that when they're given more time and they have the linguistic resources to do so, that they can express themselves more completely and more fully in writing. Now, moving on to the synchronous format, and when we're teaching synchronously, participants, you get the benefit of receiving instant feedback or answers to their questions. So for example, when we meet over Zoom, just like in a face-to-face format, you have the option of pressing the hand raise button or simply unmuting yourself and asking a question, and you can get the instructor's feedback right away. On the other hand, with asynchronous platforms, you don't necessarily get your questions answered while you have them. So you may even have a question right now as you're listening, but I wouldn't be able to answer it, at least right away. But you could definitely still send me an email and get an answer to that question. Also, in the synchronous format, participants are likely to feel more connected with one another, almost as if they were in a face-to-face session, especially when you meet over Zoom or some other online platform that enables students to meet with video. You can still see their faces, and it can be almost like as if we were meeting in the same room. Also, for the teacher, if participants can hear you and see you, a lot of times you're able to communicate more feeling and more emotions other than just in writing. Finally, breakout rooms can provide ideal meeting space for teams or small group work, and for giving people a chance to interact if you wouldn't be able to meet simultaneously in one particular location. All right, so another great thing about the advances in technology and the internet is that we have access to an incredible amount of material, a lot of free material, much of it good, some of it not so good, but there is a plethora of material out there on the internet that we as teachers can use as the basis for designing writing tasks or as the basis for creating a genre analysis activity. And on the flip side, students also have access to a lot of material that they could then use for completing these writing tasks. So if they need source material or they're interested in learning more about a particular topic so that they can write about it, the internet has a lot of information available. For teachers, there are also a number of internet sites from which we can download lesson plans and handouts relevant to second language writing. So whereas before the internet, teachers often would exchange lesson plans or handouts with one another at conferences, face-to-face, or just with colleagues in your institution. Now we can share with teachers all over the world. And so good materials can be disseminated rapidly and used in classrooms in Hawaii and also in Chicago and even in Ghana or in India. Finally, Highland in your textbook states that the internet now makes it feasible for learners to collect and publish texts online and to extend their communicative experiences beyond the classroom. So I think one of the great benefits to second language writing of the internet is that now the teacher does not have to be the only audience for students writing. So whereas before, students typically wrote a paper or some sort of text, and the teacher or maybe their classmates were the only readers. Now our students can actually publish their writing online. So not just in the form of blogs, which we'll discuss shortly, but also, for example, in writing restaurant reviews or hotel reviews. And their audience can be much wider, much more extended than just the people who are in their class. Okay, one example of a particular type of writing task that uses the internet is a web quest. Now, a web quest is going to answer a couple of issues raised by teachers and a couple concerns also of students and teachers when trying to navigate the vast amount of information available on the internet. Basically, a web quest allows teachers to select the websites that students should visit for gathering this information. And this inquiry-based task that requires learners to synthesize information from a variety of internet sources can be really effective in promoting language learning in the EFL or even the ESL classroom. And I'm going to show you an example here at the bottom. It's a web quest that I created for an ESL class back in Denver, Colorado. And what you'll see when we go here to the web quest is it consists of 6 different pieces. The first would be an introduction to the task. Now, any of you can access this site. It's a Google site that I created. It's free. And there's an introduction to what the task entails. Then there is an actual task that explains to students what they're going to be doing in this particular task. Then there is the process. So it gives students and it gives them a step-by-step explanation of what they're going to be doing. Now in this particular task, they're going to be getting to know different resources available in the community. And if you'll notice, each of these hyperlinks will bring you to a list of web pages. So teachers, you can actually do some of the work for your students. So rather than your students having to type into Google their interests, so for example, just type in, if they typed in Art Museum Honolulu, or in this case, Art Museum Denver, they might get all kinds of possible responses to their search. But you can actually tailor that search and help them to be more targeted in their reading and writing. So you as a teacher can actually read these sites ahead of time, check to see whether or not you think the language is accessible to your students, and just provide some of the legwork for your students. So the task in essence leads students through accessing these different websites. And there is a final task in which they, down here, they're actually going to create a brochure where with different activities that are available for free or cheaply in their community. Okay? And so that the end of the web quest is actually a writing task. All right, so moving on, we're going to discuss here two digital genres. So in a book by Vandergrift, she says that while many genres that predate the internet have been adapted to online environments, many new genres have also emerged in online spaces. And two of these new genres are blogs and fandoms. So these are genres that really didn't exist prior to the internet. A blog really is a tool for thinking about ideas, but thinking about them through writing. Wikipedia mentions that they are similar to online diaries, but they are different from a personal diary in that they are meant to be read by others. Vandergrift says that blogs feature the author's reflections, opinions, thoughts, and musings on a particular topic or small range of topics such as parenting, language learning, or politics. And finally, as I mentioned just a second ago, blogs are meant to be read by other people. So by having students participate or create blog posts, they are actually writing for a much greater, wider audience. Fandoms are a unique genre that really have gathered fans of a particular program, whether it be a show, a TV show, a series, a movie, a book, or another media product. And these fans, they'll gather on the internet, and based upon their love or their emotions or their interest in a particular topic, they will share their responses to the particular material, including the production of novel fan-generated content. So fans may start their own stories, which take off from the original story of interest. They may create fan art or fan videos, podcasts. I think the Harry Potter fandom is one of the biggest in the world, has millions of fans who participate and contribute in this community. So, Sauro, in her recent article, says that there is a growing need for technologies and pedagogical activities in L2 instruction that more closely resemble the technology-mediated tasks and tools that language learners actually engage with outside the classroom. I think that her advice is very sound, and that's why I wanted to include this lecture on the use of technology in a writing class. Now, your task for this unit is going to create your own blog post, but Laulima denotes it as a clog, and I'm going to show you here how you can access that clog. But basically, in your own clog, you're going to write a short reflection on one of these two options, not both, just one. So you can choose A or B. A is what are the main differences between synchronous and asynchronous channels of communication in terms of the types of writing and activities they allow, and then which method of online instruction do you prefer and why? The other option would be, do you maintain a blog or participate in a fandom? If yes, what is your motivation for doing so? And if no, why are these digital genres not of interest to you? Finally, do you see a role for their use in a course on second language writing? So whether you do have your own blog or whether you don't have a blog or don't participate in a fandom, do you still see a role for their use in a course on second language writing? So briefly before I end, I am going to exit our show and just show you how you can access the clog through Laulima. So if you are here on our course overview, our course homepage, you'll notice that on the left-hand side of your screen is the clog tool. You'll go ahead and click on the clog, And you'll see that along the top, there are different folders. So you have home, authors will have a list of all of us, my blog, and then you're going to go to create post. So in this particular create post is where you'll do your task. You can give your post a title. So as an example, I'm going to go ahead and title mine Instructions for Blog Post. And then I already have them in a document here, but I'm going to copy and paste. Again, one of the advantages of word processors. I'm going to put them, hopefully, it will paste shortly into perfect. I'm just going to clean this up because for some reason when I paste into Laulima it gives extra spaces. And you'll notice that I also make sure that I have this allow comments checked, as you'll get the opportunity to comment on your classmates' posts, and all members of this site can see this post. And I'm going to click publish. So now, not only if I go to my blog, I'm going to see that I have my own post here, which I have the option of going back to, and I can also edit it by clicking on this little pencil. But I can also go here to authors, and I can read the posts of all of you, and you can read the posts of each other. So please just answer one of the two options, not both. I don't want you to have to spend too much of your spring break writing an answer to a discussion post. But I do think both questions are interesting and worth reading. So thank you again for your time. I hope you have a wonderful spring break, and I look forward to seeing you the Monday that we return. Bye!